History calls those men the greatest who have ennobled themselves by working for the common good. Experience acclaims as happiest the man who has made the greatest number of people happy. Prometheus, having stolen fire from heaven, begins to build houses and to settle upon the earth, so philosophy, expanded to be the whole world, turns against the world of appearance. The same now with the philosophy of Hegel. Real thalers have the same existence that the imagined gods have. Has a real thaler any existence except in the imagination, if only in the general or rather common imagination of man? Bring paper money into a country where this use of paper is unknown, and everyone will laugh at your subjective imagination. Greek philosophy seems to have met with something with which a good tragedy is not supposed to meet, namely, a dull ending. What is genuine is proved in the fire, what is false we shall not miss in our ranks. The opponents must grant us that youth has never before flocked to our colors in such numbers. In the end, one will be found among us who will prove that the sword of enthusiasm is just as good as the sword of genius. The representation of private interests abolishes all natural and spiritual distinctions by enthroning in their stead the immoral, irrational, and soulless abstraction of a particular material object and a particular consciousness which is slavishly subordinated to this object. Atheism reminds one of children, assuring everyone who is ready to listen to them that they are not afraid of the bogey man. In the year 1842-43, as editor of the Rheinische Zeitung, I first found myself in the embarrassing position of having to discuss what is known as material interests. The debates on free trade and protective tariffs caused me in the first instance to turn my attention to economic questions. When the publishers of the Rheinische Zeitung conceived the illusion that by a more compliant policy on the part of the paper it might be possible to secure the abrogation of the death sentence passed upon it, I eagerly grasped the opportunity to withdraw from the public stage to my study. Political economy came into being as a natural result of the expansion of trade, and with its appearance elementary, unscientific huckstering was replaced by a developed system of licensed fraud, an entire science of enrichment. The bureaucracy is a circle from which no one can escape. Its hierarchy is a hierarchy of knowledge. For the revolution of a nation and the emancipation of a particular class of civil society to coincide, for one estate to be acknowledged as the estate of the whole society, all the defects of society must conversely be concentrated in another class. A particular estate must be the estate of the general stumbling block, the incorporation of the general limitation. A particular social sphere must be recognized as the notorious crime of the whole of society, so that liberation from that sphere appears as general self-liberation. The bureaucrat has the world as a mere object of his action. This is a kind of mutual reconciliation society. Actual extremes cannot be mediated with each other precisely because they are actual extremes. But neither are they in need of mediation, because they are opposed in essence. All forms of the state have democracy for their truth, and for that reason are false to the extent that they are not democracy. We develop new principles for the world out of the world's own principles. We do not say to the world, cease your struggles, they are foolish, we will give you the true slogan of struggle. We merely show the world what it is really fighting for, and consciousness is something that it has to acquire, even if it does not want to. Reason has always existed, but not always in a reasonable form. But, if constructing the future and settling everything for all times are not our affair, it is all the more clear what we have to accomplish at present. I am referring to ruthless criticism of all that exists, ruthless both in the sense of not being afraid of the results it arrives at and in the sense of being just as little afraid of conflict with the powers that be. The state is based on this contradiction. It is based on the contradiction between public and private life, between universal and particular interests. For this reason, the state must confine itself to formal, negative activities. When communist artisans associate with one another, theory, propaganda, etc., is their first end. But at the same time, as a result of this association, they acquire a new need, the need for society, and what appears as a means becomes an end. The brotherhood of man is no mere phrase with them, but a fact of life, and the nobility of man shines upon us from their work-hardened bodies. Do I obey economic laws if I extract money by offering my body for sale? Then the political economist replies to me, you do not transgress my laws, but see what cousin ethics and cousin religion have to say about it. My political, economic, ethics, and religion have nothing to reproach you with, but whom am I now to believe, political economy or ethics? The ethics of political economy is acquisition, work, thrift, sobriety, but political economy promises to satisfy my needs. It stems from the very nature of estrangement that each sphere applies to me a different and opposite yardstick, ethics one and political economy another, for each is a specific estrangement of man and focuses attention on a particular field of estranged essential activity, and each stands in an estranged relation to the other. Only intelligible language in which we converse with one another consists of our objects and their relation to each other. We would not understand a human language and it would remain without effect. By one side it would be recognized and felt as being a request, an entreaty, and therefore a humiliation. Our mutual value is for us the value of our mutual objects. Hence for us man himself is mutually of no value. Political economy regards the proletarian, like a horse, he must receive enough to enable him to work. It does not consider him, during the time when he is not working, as a human being. It leaves this to criminal law, doctors, religion, statistical tables, politics, and the beetle. Communism is the riddle of history solved, and it knows itself to be this solution. The entire movement of history, as simply communism's actual act of genesis, the birth act of its empirical existence, is, therefore, for its thinking consciousness the comprehended and known process of its becoming. But also when I am active scientifically, etc., an activity which I can seldom perform in direct community with others, then my activity is social, because I perform it as a man. Not only is the material of my activity given to me as a social product, as is even the language in which the thinker is active, my own existence is social activity, and therefore that which I make of myself for society and with the consciousness of myself as a social being. Natural science will in time incorporate into itself the science of man, just as the science of man will incorporate into itself natural science. There will be one science. In general, it is always empirical businessmen we are talking about when we refer to political economists, who represent their scientific creed and form of existence. Under private property, each tries to establish over the other an alien power, so as thereby to find satisfaction of his own selfish need. The increase in the quantity of objects is therefore accompanied by an extension of the realm of the alien powers to which man is subjected, and every new product represents a new potentiality of mutual swindling and mutual plundering. A few days in my old man's factory have sufficed to bring me face to face with this beastliness, which I had rather overlooked. It is impossible to carry on communist propaganda on a large scale and at the same time engage in huckstering and industry. Communism is for us not a state of affairs which is to be established, an ideal to which reality will have to adjust itself. We call communism the real movement which abolishes the present state of things. The conditions of this movement result from the premises now in existence. The premises from which we begin are not arbitrary ones, not dogmas, but real premises from which abstraction can only be made in the imagination. They are the real individuals, their activity, and the material conditions under which they live, both those which they find already existing and those produced by their activity. These premises can thus be verified in a purely empirical way. Morality, religion, metaphysics, all the rest of ideology and their corresponding forms of consciousness thus no longer retain the semblance of independence. They have no history, no development, but men, developing their material production and their material intercourse, alter, along with this their real existence, their thinking and the products of their thinking. Know only a single science, the science of history. One can look at history from two sides and divide it into the history of nature and the history of men. The two sides are, however, inseparable. The history of nature and the history of men are dependent on each other so long as men exist. The history of nature, called natural science, does not concern us here, but we will have to examine the history of men, since almost the whole ideology amounts either to a distorted conception of this history or to a complete abstraction from it. Ideology is itself only one of the aspects of this history. In communist society, where nobody has one exclusive sphere of activity but each can become accomplished in any branch he wishes, society regulates the general production and thus makes it possible for me to do one thing today and another tomorrow, to hunt in the morning, fish in the afternoon, rear cattle in the evening, criticize after dinner, just as I have a mind, without ever becoming hunter, fisherman, herdsman, or critic.